Hey, today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. And I got a little pep in my step. I'm taking this on the road, visit a neighbor friend of mine. I'm T. Glenn, and this is Conversations with T. So I always wanted to be a rock and roller, you know, Led Zeppelin, The Big Deal, The Who. I wanted to thrash around on a stage, but I wasn't born with that kind of talent, you know, right out of the box. And I was, I guess, busy with sports, that kind of thing. But when I went to college at the University of Georgia in Athens, boy, what a music scene. And I got a chance to be the manager of a band called Downright, thanks to my friend Charles Dowman. Now, that got me backstage, and I was like, this is the real deal. A lot of fun that was, but still no career. Well, today I've got a treat for you. This man is retired now, but he made a living playing drums and not being in a band. I'm telling you, he had the best of both worlds, and he's still jamming. He's got a little setup. You can hear him hitting the skins now, baby. Today I'd like to welcome Barney Lane. Barney, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I got to be ginger on that hand.
You do. I'm getting over a broken wrist from a tennis mishap, but it's getting better.
Okay, and how much longer till you're up and going?
Probably another month. Yeah, another month. I was in a hard cast and then a soft cast, and now I'm in this kind of compression sleeve, and I should maybe in about 3 more weeks be healed.
Good. Good. Then you can get back to playing drums and doing what you like.
Right.
Well, speaking of which, why drums? And how did you start out?
I probably gravitated to the drums just listening to my dad's records growing up as a little kid. He had pretty good taste in music. You know, he listened to Sinatra and Tony Bennett, and he even had some Count Basie and like Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa albums. He was a drummer himself, although not professionally, but he played in high school, so he had albums like that. And so he would listen to the albums when he got home from his day job. He had a white-collar job. And as a little kid, you know, wanting to please my dad, I'd listen to those albums with him, and I found them interesting.
Now, was that the music of the day, or was that his favorite music?
No, it wasn't the music of the day. The music of the, you know, this is like late 60s, late 50s, early 60s.
Oh, okay.
So the music of the day was rock for me. But yeah, the first stuff I listened to was actually his music. Not my music.
Right.
Yeah.
And you played along to those artists?
Well, I hadn't taken up drums yet, but
that was interesting to you.
Right. It was very interesting. I mean, I would listen to the drums, and I kind of would listen to, you know, it sounds pretty complicated to me. Listening to top 40 radio and stuff, the drums sounded for the most part simple. And I could even tell before I took up drums that what they were doing sounded more complicated. It sounded like there was more to it.
Okay, and so you were able to see that at a young age, that you could play along to the Beatles, but it was more interesting to try to do something more difficult. Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Well, as you got better in high school, tell me about your high school experience, because I know you were in band.
I was in band. I took up drums in like the 4th grade, then started playing in band. I got really good. I had a very good teacher in the town that I grew up in. He was a professional, and he was very good. And he was able to get me playing very well. And so by the time I was in high school, all my band directors played gigs. They were all good friends, and they all played gigs. So as soon as they thought I was good enough, they would use me on their jobs. So I started playing, weddings and anniversaries and conventions and stuff with my band directors. And I actually started those first professional gigs when I was in 10th grade.
That's amazing. And my little experience is that those events, those venues pay way better than a night at the club.
Sure. They paid better, and you had to do more because naturally you played swing music, you played rock tunes, you played Latin, because of all the dance stuff, like bossa novas and rumbas and all those things. And I had to know all those styles to be able to cover those gigs. So in the beginning it was, it was challenging because anytime I didn't know something, a band director would say, hey, you've got to listen to some records and you got to learn how to play that style. And I wanted to work.
Yeah.
So I would go home and listen and get that style down so I could do it.
And so nowadays we just hit YouTube and find out how to play it. But in your day, you had to listen. You had to parse it out. You had to think about it. And there might be something tricky you missed, and someone tells you, hey, in this part, you missed this little shuffle or something.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, and so they, of course, I'm dating myself, but, we were using records back then,
Yeah.
But I would get an appropriate record and I'd listen to it. Sometimes I'd play to it. Some records I'd listen to over and over until the record sounded like somebody frying bacon. You ruin the record, right?
Just crackle.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so you're playing with your band directors, you're getting gigs, you're sort of moving forward faster. When you start thinking about college, where's your love of music? How does that fit into college?
Well, in the beginning, I wanted to major in music in college, and I went to my local university and I took a music aptitude test to kind of see where I was at as far as being able to be successful in college at music. And although I did very well in playing drums because I was way above average, but all the theory parts of that test that I took, I did not do well in because I never took a theory test, a theory class in high school. Even though they offer one, I never took one. And so when I met with the music counselor at the university,
Which university was this?
University of Delaware.
Okay.
And she said, you probably shouldn't be a music major. And because, you did really poor on this test. Usually we expect that you're further along in these other areas to be successful. And I said, well, I really want to make music a career. And she said, well, you can still play music, make it an avocation, like get into a rock band.
Right. Live the life.
Right. And, work a day job and play in a rock band. Well, that, I was very depressed coming home from that because that's not what I wanted to do.
At that point in time, what did you want to do? Like, where did you see yourself, if not in a rock band?
I saw myself somehow making a living in music. Maybe it wasn't where I ended up, which is in Los Angeles, but in some way or form making a living in music.
Were you just sort of thinking you would do like what your band directors, what y'all had done, sort of?
That's one avenue. You could teach, at a high school or teach at a university,
or play those kind of gigs,
play jobs like I had been doing.
Mm-hmm. Safe but fun, long, good paying jobs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So then you go to college, you take this test, and you get this news. It's kind of like a gut punch. How does anybody, but you in particular, because I feel like resilience these days is tough for kids. They don't like to be told no. They don't like to fail at something. They'll just quit and never do that again. But you didn't do that. How did you come back?
Yeah. So what I did was in the beginning I kind of took that person's advice and said, okay, well, I'm going to go to a university. I ended up going to the University of Tennessee, and I was not a music major. I was a poli-sci major, but because I played really well, I was still in marching band, concert band, jazz band, percussion ensemble. I was in all those things. So even though I wasn't a music major, I was 50% of my time was in the music building.
So you had to do all the performative stuff.
Right.
Okay.
So I was still playing, and I even played a lot of gigs when I was in Tennessee, around Knoxville and things like that. So what I did was I ended up not wanting to do that, stay at that university. So I was going to go back to the University of Delaware, again, not be a music major. And then I went to a kind of a jazz band clinic. It was clinics that are actually given all over the country. They were called Stan Kenton sponsored clinics. And I met a really good drummer at that clinic. I didn't participate in the clinic. It was a week-long thing. But I could hear the concerts that these teachers gave at night. And there was a drummer named Ed Soph that was at the clinic, and he was an amazing player. And I would hear him every evening when these guys would give a concert. And I would go up afterwards, and I introduced myself and said that I really want to be in music, and told him what I was doing. And he said, you should come to North Texas, which is a very good music school. Actually, there are two great jazz music schools. One's Berklee School of Music in Boston, the other's University of North Texas. And he was a teacher there, and he said, you ought to come to North Texas. And so I thought, I still said, well, I'm kind of behind in these other things. I told him about taking that aptitude test, and he says, well, why don't you get an ear training book and try and work on it over the summer, and see if you can catch yourself up to these areas that you feel you're behind in. So that's what I did. I got an ear training book. It came with records.
Right.
And I learned how to do a little bit of harmony and a harmonic dictation, melodic dictation. Didn't get great at it, but I got decent at it. And I transferred to North Texas, and I was able to do well enough on the aptitude test to get in. The playing test, I was already good enough, so I got in easily off that part of it. So I ended up majoring in music.
So were you already reading music, regardless of the theory pieces?
I was always good at reading music, even when I was, started in 4th grade, went up through high school. Reading drum music, I was always very good at.
Okay, because I think that serves you well later on.
Yeah, it does.
So you go from Delaware, where you get this sort of denial. You move yourself to Tennessee in pursuit of still your dream, but it's not going to be through the music avenue. But then, in sort of a non-linear way, you find yourself to North Texas with the opportunity finally. So you leave North Texas when you're done with college. Is that when you go to LA?
Yeah, I came back initially to Delaware for a short period of time, 6 or 8 months, and then my wife and I got married in the meantime, and my wife and I moved to LA to pursue music. The teacher that I told you about that I originally had in Delaware, he moved to LA a year before me.
Oh.
So he was able to shoot me gigs and help me make contacts, as well as a lot of North Texas people that moved there at the same time that I did, and some that moved a year or two before I did that I knew. So there's a lot of North Texas musicians in LA. So I was able to get fairly busy right away.
Yeah, you had the networking down. All right. This is really cool. So when I first met you and I found out some of the things you had done, it was so impressive to know that a fella in my neighborhood had this kind of backstory, life, and which was really the impetus for the first time we played, and then now the podcast here. Talk a little bit about the jobs you had in Hollywood or LA, and what studio work. Take us through, tell us first a few of the gigs you did in the studios there, just so people can get a frame of reference, and then talk a little bit about what it's like to do that. What is that work really like?
Okay, well, I was able to make some contacts to get into studio work, and then once you make those contacts and you kind of get in with different contractors that contract the musicians for that work, that's what kind of keeps you going. And
a network in and of itself.
And I ended up doing, Love Boat. I ended up doing The Fall Guy. Some of these are older shows. I don't know that your audience is going to remember some of these.
No, but they are classics.
Yeah. And I did Diagnosis Murder with Dick Van Dyke, that show. I've done some Family Guy stuff. And I've done a lot of different movies also. Studio work is a little bit different in that it's mainly a reading thing. You're actually going to go in, the composer is going to put music on a music stand, and you're going to start reading what we call cues. And the cues could be very short, cutting from one scene to another. Maybe a cue might be 4 bars long. That's it. And you play the 4 measures and then you go to the next cue. Or the cue could be long, like let's say if it's the music that goes over the opening credits of a TV episode or the closing credits. Well, that would be a longer sheet of music. That might be a whole page or 2 pages of music.
Okay.
And it's everything in between, very short cues and some long cues. And when you do a movie call, it may take you 3 to 4 hours to do all the cues for a movie.
And is that out of context? Like, is there a big screen up where you're watching the movie, like you see in the behind the scenes of John Williams' Star Wars playing, and you see them scoring it, and you have an idea of what's going on?
Sometimes there is. They used to do this a lot for cartoons. They would always have the cartoon on the screen because they would have to match up the music to what the action was on the screen.
Right.
Sometimes, not as much anymore, that kind of music. Sometimes if they do like a really long chase scene, either in a car or somebody on a horse, that's a very long scene, you might see it on a screen and they might try and match it up. But they have so many ways of just matching it up, metronomically speaking, now that you don't see that much anymore. They know exactly what the tempo is, and they can gear the tempo to know exactly where something changes on the screen and the music's going to change. They can sync that up pretty easily.
And so then the work is really done by the person who gave you the sheet music. They have to know, if they know exactly what they want, then all the stuff is it's handled.
Right.
They already know ahead how this is going to go.
Yeah, they compose the music. They're the ones that meet with the director and all the producer and all the people who tell them what they want for a certain scene, and then they compose that music, and then they bring studio musicians in to record the music. So
you hung out with Seth MacFarlane all the time after your Family Guy sessions, right?
No.
Never met him?
No, never met him. That's the same way with anything I've done that had actors or stuff in it. I've never met Lee Majors, who did The Fall Guy. I've never met Dick Van Dyke that did Diagnosis Murder.
You never met Isaac from The Love Boat, who served
never
all
met
this?
Those people.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the only person that you're meeting is the composer.
And so, how do you get paid for all this? What does that look like if you're only doing 3 or 4 hours a day?
It's very lucrative. It's a union scale, but the union scale is very high, and you also get paid for what they call doubles. So being a drummer and a percussionist, because I played mallets and timpani and everything else, you get a double for each one. So you might get a base pay of, let's say you get a base pay for something for $500 for 3 hours, but you get 15% of that for every double. So you play timpani on a cue, that's a double of 15% of 500. And then you play Latin percussion, that's a double, 15%. You play xylophone or vibraphone, you get a double, that's 15%. So you can see how all that adds up to, you may go in there to do, 3 hours, but you're getting paid $1,000 or $1,200.
So how long did your career from the time you got to LA, which was a year or so after college, how many years were you doing this?
45.
45 years.
Yes.
So you were able to play the drums for 45 years without, joining a major band that disrupted family life.
And that doesn't mean I didn't play in bands. I mean, I had, friends that I played in bands, and we did jazz clubs and fusion clubs, and I would do occasional concerts and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that I was strictly doing just studio work, but
right. Yeah, because you could supplement with these other things. Mm-hmm. But you weren't locked into, let's say, a 4-month tour schedule.
No.
Where you were playing late nights and sleeping in hotels away from the family. And, especially when you're young, there's a lot of nonsense that comes with that kind of fantasy life.
Yeah, that's tough. One of the first things I did when I came to LA is I went back to Atlantic City. This was a contact I actually had back east, and he wanted to know if I wanted to do 6 weeks at Caesar's Palace. And I hadn't really made very many contacts, so I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I got to LA, then almost immediately went back to Caesar's Palace in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I didn't like it. You're living out of a suitcase. The money was good, but I didn't like the life.
Yeah, when something you love to do becomes a grinding work, it's just not the same.
Yeah. And it's not good for raising a family. Once I had kids, you want to, my kids are like any other kids. They're in Little League Baseball and everything else. And, if you're on the road and you're going to miss every little thing like that, it's not good family life. So what you want to try and do is find work in town where it's more like a regular job.
Right.
I mean, it's not 9 to 5, but it's more like a regular job.
Yeah, which actually sounds great because you can come home.
Mm-hmm.
So, your story is a story of perseverance, staying focused on something that interested you a lot, that is really lovely because it stems from a joy your dad gave you. And then you got some miscues along the way, and you had to fight through those things. You had to tough it out. Times when maybe you weren't sure how it was going to all end up, but you took a gamble and moved to LA, or took a gamble and transferred to North Texas. And I've always been amazed at something Steve Jobs said in a speech at Stanford graduation. He said, sometimes looking forward, it's hard to know where you're going, but you have to have just an incredible belief in what you're doing, because looking back, it'll all make sense. The dots connect very easily, but you just have to be very devoted if it's something you truly believe. So, today kids they have this bad rap of being fragile, of not having the resilience, of not having the validation they need to keep going on, not seeing where the future's going to lead them. What advice would you give someone who has a love for music and let's just say they're a middle schooler?
Well, the first thing I would do is tell them to try and get involved in a band program if you're at a public school, because you're gonna be exposed to all kinds of music. It doesn't mean, you know, you're just playing classical music. You know, there's band pieces that are rock pieces, all jazz pieces. You'll probably have to learn how to read music, which comes in handy. But the most important things that I found in staying busy is being able to read music well and being able to play styles of music. There's too many drummers I see today that they only play one style of music. You know, if they're a rock drummer, it's like, don't bother calling me for anything else. Right. I do one thing, I play one thing.
And that's all
right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing is just opening yourself up to all sorts of things. And then if you have a burning desire to try and do it professionally, is don't let anybody define you. I mean, I tried not to let the University of Delaware counselor define me when she said, you know, chances of you making it aren't too good.
Right.
So I tried not to let those people define me.
That seems like I think many people who have succeeded in the way they wanted to have a story somewhere in their past where someone said, "You're not going to make it, kid," and in spite of it, they did.
Right.
And I think it's wonderful. So you brought your drum set over here and jammed with me one time.
I did.
That was the first time I'd ever played with a live drummer, and it made all the difference in my confidence, in my sort of general ability to negotiate, staying in time, staying on time. And it really, for me, I felt like I broke on through a barrier. And I just want to say that when you get better, I can't wait to do it again.
Oh yeah, well, let's do it again for sure.
So are you doing anything have you played gigs local, or what's on your horizon? Do you have any aspirations to play more?
I would like to play local gigs. I haven't done that yet. I've only been here a short time, but mostly I would like to play kind of the music that I like to play. So it might let me out of certain kinds of music. Like I'm not too interested in playing country music, right, which is pretty big around here.
It is big around
here. Yeah, right. So, but if I found the right situation, yeah, sure, I'd love to play.
That's awesome.
That's why I still practice.
That's why you stay sharp.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I love it, and I can't wait to get together again. Thank you so much for hanging out and just telling some of my viewers what it means to be, to persevere, what it means to have a life in music that isn't, you know, the cliche rock and roll lifestyle. You got to do what you wanted for 45 years. You raised a family in LA, and here you are in retirement enjoying it.
Right.
Well, good work, and thanks again, Barney.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. So until we see each other again, be kind and one love.